Hello everyone. Today I'm painting Itty Bitty Boo in a cowboy hat. If you're not familiar, Itty Bitty Boo is a stuffed animal made after one of these cute little puppies that's, I think, getting kind of famous online. Anyway, um, some of the gift stores near me have Itty Bitty Boo in different costumes, and I think I got this one maybe last Halloween. Anyway, I just wanted to paint him and thought that would be a fun activity. And I've always liked drawings of stuffed animals. I'm thinking Winnie the Pooh and Piglet. And they're just so adorable and cute. And even though they don't really have bone structure and the proper anatomy, it's fun to see if you can bring them to life a little bit. So because I am so familiar with this little guy and so attached to him, I decided to use my viewfinder. As you can see on the right side, I just traced him, and maybe because of that made him a little smaller than I had to, but it's still, I'm fine with it. I don't have any super plans for this video or this painting except for practice. So that weight, by the way, I just stuck under this little table to put it on an incline so my paint will, I don't necessarily want it to drip, but I want it to have some gravity pulling it, just to help with the flow of the paint. So just going to put in the first layer, and now I started out painting in oil paints before I moved to watercolor. I would think, now I'm self-taught, and so I don't know how it's taught formally, but I would think that people would learn watercolor before oil paint, just because watercolor seems to be the next step naturally after sketching and drawing. So that's just my opinion, and I'm assuming a lot here. I actually just dived right into the oil painting, but there are some differences as far as the way, the techniques and the way that paint's laid down between watercolor and oil paint. So we have some dripping and flowing going on, which you don't necessarily have with oil paint so much. We also have the fact that the paper's kind of unforgiving. With oil paint, you can wipe off mistakes a lot of times, but you can't really hide mistakes with oil paint or with watercolor. Once you put that pigment on the paper, it stays there, unless you use gouache or acrylic paints to literally cover and mask it over. So that's something that's challenging with watercolor. Another thing is just being so patient that you have to let certain areas dry, like these eyes. In order to get the eyes, I had to let the brown behind him dry completely. Otherwise, the lines would look very scary. They would just start running, and they wouldn't be round with solid edges. They would be flowing into his fur. And that's exactly what happened here when I just added that light color to the brim of his hat, and it made the brown, I don't know if it's like a ribbon or a buckle around his hat, but it made it bleed into the bill of his hat. Now sometimes you want the flow, so it's just really trial and error, getting, like, here's some flow right here, getting the effects you want, and some areas you do want there to be flow, and then other areas you need to keep hard lines, I guess you could say, or hard edges. And here's an area I do want hard edges, is around his muzzle, is the fur there was darker, and also just to separate it from the rest of his head. All right, so now for this layer I'm using a white watercolor paint. When you want to lighten paints, it's good to use a light colored water paint. And this is not a gouache. Gouache is completely opaque. This is actually a white watercolor paint. And when it's wet, it looks a lot more harsh than it will once it dries. Like if you're looking at it right now, even this little line I put down is very harsh, but once it dries, it kind of it's not so extreme looking. Now I'm actually going to add more layers. That's one thing I wanted to say about the watercolor paint also, is just I was surprised when I switched to watercolor after doing so much oil painting, because it takes quite a bit of time. I actually did this painting over 2 days, and I'm actually not even done. Even though I ended this video, I'm still planning to work on the painting after the video, maybe adding more details and more shading and highlighting, and just keep working it. I know some people say you can't overwork a painting. I don't think that's usually my problem. So I want to just keep working on them. But I do a little bit more in this video. One thing I wanted to point out is there was a smudge. Can you see over on the right edge of the paper block? There's like some pink or red stain, and so I decided I would just mark out a 5x7 and then trim the painting to a 5x7, because that's pretty much a standard size for framing. And I actually make it a little bigger. I did 5 1/4 by 7 1/4 inches. Alright, so we're just working on the shadowy area, which is green mixed with just a touch of red to kind of tone it down. And you can see the green I have there right out of the tube. I didn't mix. A lot of times I'll make my greens with blues and yellows, and this one's straight out of the tube. So I'm not sure exactly what the properties. It looks kind of like a viridian, but I think it's more of a maybe phthalo, actually, some phthalo action. And then I've got a purple next to that, and then I've got, you can't see it off the film, but I've got ultramarine blue as well. All right, and I have some sort of transparent earthy orange, or French Italian orange, or which is more like a brown, that I use as the shading on his ears, mixed with just a drop of ultramarine. So here I'm just trying to bring up the lighter area of his scarf or handkerchief. The fur, with his fur, also, I'm not sure about my light source. It didn't seem to, it was just kind of coming from the top, but it was very soft. It was in my bedroom, and I have windows on two sides of the house, so there was light coming in from 2 sides. And then also I think it was just kind of an overcast day, so it was pretty soft light and not very harsh, and so the shadow was just beneath the stuffed animal. And I'm going to go back and work on more of the shadow, and just kind of push and pull the shadows and highlights a little more, and maybe add some detail to the scarf. The scarf has like a paisley motif in white, and so I might go back with some gouache and a really thin brush and add some of those little paisley and dotted lines onto his scarf. And also I want to maybe work on the folds of the hat and just darken the shadow area on the brim of his hat, and just it looks like the brim is just a little, it could use lightened right above his eyes as well. Anyway, let's see, we're almost done here. In the last minute or two, I'm just going to attach, I guess, some of his face. It's in the scarf. It seemed like there were some gaps there, so I'm just going to fill those in. That's something to keep in mind if you're looking at this to learn more about watercolor, because I mean, you got to just keep checking everything, and I think it's good to even take a break between days sometimes, especially as when you're learning, until you get just like a pilot that has so many checks and balances and a protocol. There's things with painting that you need to check, like check this, check that, maybe like have this mental checklist to go through. I mean, we're not going to be flying a plane, obviously, but still, there's certain things that you might forget about, and it's good to get in the habit of just automatically checking for these things every time. As far as shadows, as far as light, about reflection, and anatomy, everything. So just start thinking about that if you're an artist. All right, he's just a fun little guy, and I'm having fun, even though his face isn't quite as perfect as he looks. He's kind of was a strange angle when I started out. Anyway, I still think he's cute. So hope you enjoyed this video. And this is earlier, and I've added a few more layers since these photos. Here's one more where I'm at right now, and I'm going to keep working on them, like I said. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.